so much has been going on with the Alec Murdaugh case and cases that surround it, whether he's lying about this, getting charged with this over here, having to speak about this upcoming trial over here, whatever it is, he is still knee deep in scandal. And we're going to talk about the highlights of it in today's video. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the little old sofa back there. It is technically a chair and a half, but who's counting? My name is Paul, and Roscoe is under said pretend sofa chair and a half. And we are going to be hanging out today and talking about Alec Murdaugh, like I said in the little intro. Now, we have not touched base with this case in a while, so if you've been following it religiously, some of this you might be like, Paul, this is kind of like 3-week-old news. Well, it ain't for me. I've been going down the rabbit hole today. But that's what we're going to do, is we're just going to talk about all that kind of stuff in today's video. And before we get into all that, I do want to make room on the old sofa for today's sponsor, Babbel. Hola, mi amo es Paul. Muy bien. ¿Y tú? Y'all, I'm going to be brushing up on a foreign language this year, which for me is going to be Spanish. And our sponsor today, Babbel, is going to help me get there. So Babbel is a language learning app. It teaches you how to speak, read, listen in all new languages. Now, it provides various tools and real-world conversations. This can be through lessons, games, stuff that you're used to consuming, like podcasts, videos, even live online classes with expert teachers. So whether you want to become fluent, maybe you're planning a vacation somewhere where you need to speak this language, or maybe you're even trying to communicate better with a loved one or somebody at work, Babbel is going to help you get there. Spanish was always the language that I would study in high school, and then even when I went back to school as an adult in college. Now, once I quit taking my Spanish classes, though, I totally quit using it. The one thing that I've really enjoyed about Babbel is that whether I'm sitting at the desktop or on my phone, the way the app is done, I can sit here and go through that and learn something that's useful and helpful, keeps my brain going, and it's something that I want to know how to speak and use, whether I have a few minutes in the morning before I get going for the day, or whether I'm sitting in traffic, whatever, right? I have absolutely loved how easy it is to just pick the phone up, open it, and get in a couple of like very common phrases and whatnot. So real language teachers design these lessons, and it's even scientifically proven to help you start speaking a new language in 3 weeks. They even have live classes. You get 2 free classes with your subscription. Babbel teaches real-world conversations, practical things that you're going to use, whether, it's out at the restaurant, whether it's traveling and whatnot. That was one thing when I was in college that I always felt like, okay, great, this is a textbook definition, but what's it really like? And I feel like with Babbel, that's what I'm getting.
Yo. Tú.
Babbel has a few different subscriptions to choose from, even a lifetime subscription. To get Babbel, click the link below, and when you use my link, you will get 60% off. You literally have nothing to lose and a new language to gain. Hola, once again. Be sure to check out all of their stuff down in the description box below. Now let's go ahead and start talking about this case, about the video. Now what we're gonna do in the very beginning of this is we're just gonna go over some, like if you haven't been following this type thing, like the 30-second breakdown. So let's talk about that now. So like I said, we're gonna be going over recent legal maneuvers in regard to Alex, and specifically the case revolving around their late housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, also Mallory Beach, also Stephen Smith, also Corey Fleming. I mean, it just keeps going on, right? Now remember, Alec was convicted of taking the life of his wife and son, Paul, and the jury did convict him of this. This was a 6-week-long trial, unprecedented for this area, and, he was trying to say that it was, he didn't really know what he was saying, right? But during this, the financial crimes galore came out on the stand. He admitted to them, and this would dig his hole even deeper. Now, a judge did sentence him to life in prison. Now, specifically what we're going to be talking about first is Gloria Satterfield. Now, this was the Murdaugh's longtime housekeeper, and she allegedly tripped over one of their dogs when she was like coming up the stairs or something, fell, and ended up dying from these complications. This was in 2018. Now, we're going to talk about that. That's part of the update is the dogs and the lies and all this kind of stuff. Now, here is the thing. At the time, Murdaugh, Alec, he orchestrated this whole scheme where he was like, okay, look, he went to their kids and to Gloria's children's sons and was like, look, y'all need to sue me for the house insurance. We're going to say it was the dogs. And, we're going to get you a settlement, that type thing. Now, allegedly or supposedly, this had been purchased as a home insurance just months before Gloria's death, which I do find interesting. Okay. Now, then what he did, he being Alec, is he went to his former college roommate / friend / literal partner in crime, Corey Fleming, and basically they worked in the scheme together. And so Corey was funneling these checks, $3.5 million worth of these said checks. And it was supposed to be for the Satterfield's estate, right? Like this whole thing that Alec had orchestrated, but it wasn't going to them, it was going to these two crooked criminals. They literally robbed her family blind of this money, and the whole time saying, oh no, we didn't reach a settlement, just push them off. They never got this money, and this would honestly be what would be some of his unraveling. Now, he had so many things going on in his life, Alex is who I'm speaking of, that, it was going to happen eventually, but this was one of them. The Mallory Beach thing was as well. When people started looking in behind the scenes and being like, what's going on here? Now, her surviving family members would eventually get an attorney. This attorney would uncover information, and they would end up getting millions of dollars later. But they never would have gotten it if this had not come to light and all of this stuff happened, right? So there is that. However, the story doesn't stop there. Now, recently, Alec was hit with 22 financial fraud charges, right? Now, remember, he's already doing life in prison, okay? Now, some of these included and stemmed from the Gloria's situation with this, where they stole the over $3.5 million from her. Okay, so that's like a quick 60-second version of this going on. Now, there's other cases that stem for this, and we'll get more into those updates and talk a little bit about those and like the 30-second version of what's going on with it. I just wanted to kind of get everyone up to par with this, because here's my thing, and I'll ask these questions along the way, and I'll pose them to you as well. As these lies are uncovered, more and more lies and whatnot, I mean, this is what Alex was good for, it leaves you wondering, well, what really happened then? You know what I'm saying? Like, it almost makes it worse. If it could possibly get worse. Now, here's one thing too. So remember how earlier I said, well, Alec was, admitting to these crimes on the stand and all this type of stuff. During his murder trial for his wife and son, it was almost like at times his strategy was to admit to these financial crimes, be on the stand and just own it and talk about it. I'm a horrible person, because it was almost like better to admit to that to try and get out of the murder. You know what I'm saying? Well, by doing that, obviously it opens up another can of worms for him. Now, of course, he was trying to get out of the charges against his wife and son. Well, now he got convicted of those, and also all these financial crimes that he's like admitting to and whatnot. But here's the thing. So when it came down to the whole stuff with Corey and all this, Alec was like, no, nobody else knew about this. This was me. He was trying to take all the blame for it and whatnot. Well, that's real cute. That's real dandy. And he's trying to be a little stand-up man after the fact. Now, I'm sure he was trying to get something out of that, because as we've seen with most of his behavior, he's not going to do something out of the kindness of his heart. Well, this doesn't help a situation that Corey Fleming, 54 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud in federal court. Now, he does face up to 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine for the crime. So, yeah, he's admitting to this, right? He's pleading out and whatnot. We'll see what happens with him. Now, again, it doesn't even stop there, because my whole thing with this is I'm just like, where do the lies stop? So this brings us to one of the first things here that I want to talk about. And I'd done a post about this while the recent trials that we followed here were going on. I didn't have time to make a video on it. And I've talked about it in some other stuff, but we're just going to talk about it now. So I'm going to put this up on the screen, and we can pause to read or whatever you want to do. This is by Michael M. DeWitt Jr. and Donovan Slack and the USA Today Network, and the article title is Alec Murdaugh admits lying about dogs causing former housekeeper's fatal fall. Alrighty, so let's look at the quick highlights of this and then talk a little bit about it. Okay, so I'm going to put some of these images up here, screenshots of this article. You can pause to read it, or you can look at the link below, but I'm just going to talk about some of the highlights of it. So let's go ahead with this first one. All right, so it goes into, the first part about Alex Murdaugh is now admitting that he built an insurance company out of millions after the death of his family's housekeeper and lied about the dogs. Now, it goes into this lawsuit that was brought by Nautilus Insurance Company against Murdaugh and others alleging fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud. And it was saying that they provided a $5 million umbrella policy for Murdaugh that paid out claims after Gloria Satterfield's death. And in the filing, it just says that, he rushed to the scene, arriving before EMS, and then fabricated a story about what caused the fall that eventually led to her death a week later. Now, pause for a second before we go to the next one. I just want to say this about that. Imagine you are the type person that this is going on. This was not, it doesn't matter if it's a stranger or not, right? But even this is like family. That is the first thing that comes to his mind, is how he can swindle and maneuver it to get what he wants out of it. Now, again, we don't know what happened with her, okay? Because remember, now he's saying the dogs, did this. Now, again, it could have been the dogs, but he's lying to try and get out of paying the money. You see what I'm saying? But because he lies about every single thing, it's like you don't know what to believe. Okay, let's go to the next one. Now go down to the second paragraph where it says, no dogs were involved in the fall of Gloria Satterfield on February 2nd, 2018. The filing says, after her death, defendant invented Ms. Satterfield's purported statement that dogs caused her fall to force his insurers to make a settlement payment. Now it goes into saying how he approached the heirs after she died, orchestrated this fraudulent insurance claim, and then pressured Nautilus to settle so he could steal the money, and that he denies that anybody else knew about this. Okay, now before we go to the next one, I have no doubt that he did all that, right? That made this up and did whatever he had to do. I also don't think that the other people, mostly her heirs, knew about this. Why? Why would you even, you know what I'm saying? Now, Corey Fleming obviously did, right? He helped him steal their money. But I don't think that they were in on this scheme or any of that type of stuff. I'm sure he just smooth talked them right on out of any money they would have got. Now, the next, as you see, it says, who should pay back the stolen insurance money? And just the part here where it's them saying, well, according to Murdaugh's court filing, he's pointing the victims as a liable party, even though he admits that he stole the money. So it's basically going on and talking about the money that was gotten and paid back and this and that and the other, and it's almost like they would be getting extra. Now on to the last one. One of the Satterfield's family lawyers, Eric Bland, took to social media debunking the notion that the victims should have to pay back any damages, and basically went on to say what we're all thinking, which is, my God, how low can you go? Now again, essentially with this whole thing, it's like him pointing the fingers at them. We're like, well, they got the money, they should have to pay it back, and and I'm just like, this is what I'm talking about when I talk about Alec and what he's willing to do, and you can't believe anything. And I get a lot of this is legal maneuvering, but again, start from just the beginning. She falls, your first thing is, oh my God, let's rip somebody off. Let's make money off this. If she fell. Now, secondly, you swindle the sons, the heirs, and all that out of that money. Now you're sitting here trying to say, oh, well, we did this and got this settlement and so you should get the money from them. I'm just like, what world do we live in where this is even a thought process, right? I mean, so you see just this right here. Imagine this was not a thing to him to rip all these people off that he did. And again, if you want to sit here and go, there's two versions here. A lot of people think that he did not do what happened to Maggie and Paul, and a lot of people think he did, right? This is the level of grimy that anything is possible in my book, right? I mean, I think that he took their lives. Like, that's in my opinion. I think he did. I think the evidence showed that. And I have no doubt that he committed all these financial crimes too. Now let's continue on and look at some more of like the kind of grimy financial stuff going on, and let's talk about his retirement fund. Okay, now I'm going to put this screenshot up of this little article snippet, and we can talk about this. So you'll see it's by Amanda Shaw. published June 13th, 2013, and this is from Hampton County, South Carolina. Now we're just going to look at the highlighted part here. His legal team said they spent well over $600,000 they were able to access from his retirement account for his double murder trial, which lasted a historic 6 weeks. Murdaugh reportedly needs an additional $160,000 for his appeal. In May, a judge denied a motion from Murdaugh to pull the money from nearly $500,000 left in his 401k, which his defense argues is untainted. Now, here's my thing with this. I get that, or should I not say that? I don't understand all the comings and goings and the inner workings and this and that of money that's here, there, and whatnot. So when a crime like this happens, and let's not even talk about the murders, let's talk about the financial part. So when it comes to light that this man has ripped off half of South Carolina, right? Okay. And you have two sides to it, because he's in prison for the rest of his life. Well, he has this retirement 401k, and they're like, oh, no, that money didn't have anything to do with this. This is legit money. Well, I'm like, no, he owes A, B, and C this much money. That should go to that, right? Because he did the crime, you do the time type thing. You do the crime, pay the fine, do the time, however you want to say it. Okay. Now, again, I don't know all the legal stuff to it, right? So, there's probably stuff well, no, technically there's this and that. I don't know. Drop it in the comments if you do. But I do find a couple of things with this weird, because I guess to me, I'm like, well, didn't Buster get a lot of the money or stuff like that? How does this work out when basically a dynasty crumbles? You learn that it was all smoke and mirrors. He's ripping people off left and right. So it's okay, they sold the house, they did this, they did that, they were trying to transfer this and that and the other so that nobody could get the money. So it's well, does Buster have the money? And wouldn't Buster be willing to put that money up? Right now, I get if you can finagle to be well, Dad has $500,000 in his bank account, he should be using that. I understand that, especially in this type scenario, because let's be honest, the appeal, I'm what's the appeal? You know what I'm saying? Especially, he'll do life over these financial crimes alone. Now, I'm not also trying to say that it's well, we should just go ahead and give up over here, because you never know, right? But at the end of the day, it's not looking good. So this part, I find not confusing. I get what they're saying, but I also just feel it's unfortunate that there are people who have been ripped off by him, and that if there is funds that could go to that, I feel they should go to that instead of his appeal. Now, his attorneys, meaning Alex's attorneys, they are saying that they expect the charges against the client to be resolved quickly. It does sound like he is cooperating in this manner, so he might just be pleading out to a lot of these, right? To avoid trial or whatever, and just moving along with things. So I go two ways on that. I feel we would get more information if he went to trial on them, but my God, right? What a waste of taxpayer money, so if he were to do whatever it takes just to be okay, look, I'm going to plead guilty, what do we have to do to move on? Great for the victims to move on, right? And if that's what they wanted, then that's what I want. But with the Gloria trial or whatever, I feel man, we could really find out some more information. Now, I do feel we could still get more intel from that, regardless of what he pleads out to, because there's this murkiness as to what really happened with her. And now, that being said, let's use this to segue into a couple of other updates and related cases with this. And when I say updates, really, I'm just talking about some stuff that has gone on recently. And first, let's talk about Mallory Beach. I'm going to put some screenshots of an article up here that we can talk about and kind of go off of that. And let's look at the first one, the headline. So it says, Alex Murdaugh to face questioning in Mallory Beach boating death case. It's by Audrey Conklin, Fox News, and it says that Paul Murdaugh was allegedly drunk when he crashed his family's boat into a bridge, killing Mallory Beach in 2019. Now let's go ahead on to the next thing. I'm just going to go ahead and hit on some highlights of these. You can pause to read through if you want, or click the links in the description below. So it says that Alex now faces questioning in the wrongful death case of Mallory Beach. This was the 19-year-old friend of his son, Paul Murdaugh, who died aboard the Murdaugh's family boat while Paul was driving in 2019. scene. And a judge Monday ordered the South Carolina Department of Corrections to make defendant Alex Murdaugh available for a deposition in the case. Now, it does go down here to say that a trial date in the family's wrongful death suit against the Murdaughs is set for August 14th, so that's coming up. Now, let's pause for 1 second. Now, for those who might not be familiar with this, again, Mallory died on this boating accident. Now, what we're about to get into here, because there's a couple of things going on. There's the wrongful death suit, but they also are suing that gas station that sold the alcohol to Paul. Paul used Buster's driver's license to get alcohol. He got schnockered and he wrecks the boat, being not a nice person. And Mallory lost her life on this. Now, if you've watched the docu-series on this and whatnot, you'll learn this was one of the huge things. Paul doing this and Mallory losing her life, that was the beginning of the end for the Murdaugh dynasty. Okay, so when you go back and look at things of taking people out and whatnot, to me, it's very ironic that we're now in this situation of, if part of Alex's, I'm going to take Maggie out, I'm going to take Paul out, whatever his reasonings were, he's still in this scenario where this case has still come back to bite him in the ass, right? As it should. This young lady should never have lost her life, right? This was a horrifying way to go, and it gives me goosebumps. I mean, when I think about the docu-series with it and her boyfriend at the time, that the screaming and the yelling, looking for her, and having to leave the water, knowing, probably what was going to come of it, and it did. So let's go ahead and move on to the next screenshot. Now, this just is more of what I've already said about him using Buster's ID to purchase alcohol at Parker's Kitchen convenience store. Now, like I said, it's also named in the suit. And he got this alcohol for the group of people who were on this excursion, and as the article says, that turned deadly. Let's continue on to the next. Now, before I put this screenshot up here, what we're going to be looking at is a quote from basically a filing that came through. Now, this is basically Parker's Kitchen trying to get out of trouble. Now, let me read it and then we'll talk about my opinions on this, okay? So we're going to put it up and now we're going to read it and talk about it. Even setting aside anyone's intoxication, repeatedly getting back on the boat was plainly dangerous, given the dense fog, lack of flashlights or other boating lights, and the absence of life jackets, the attorneys wrote. Adding alcohol to this equation only amplified those obvious dangers. The boaters, including Mallory Beach, chose to put their lives at risk by repeatedly getting on the boat that evening. Now, this is one of those things where I'm just like, oh my God. So I go both ways on this. First of all, these were young people doing young people stuff, right? And I'm not trying to say that what they did was not completely uncalled for. Drinking and driving and drinking and boating of any sort is never a good idea, and this is why. Now, I'm not trying to blame them for what happened either, right? Because it was a perfect storm. Paul got very schnockered. What are you going to do, right? I mean, that's where you're just like, my God, if we know what we knew now and we could rewind things. The story that was played out to me from hearing other people is they tried to take the boat from him, not take it, but let me drive, Paul, let me do this. And it was that, get left, whatever. I can understand where a convenience store is going to try to say, or whatever it is, the little kitchen place, the gas station, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, they don't want to get sued, right? Okay, we get this. Paul used Buster's fake driver's license. He shouldn't have been sold the alcohol. End of story, Clearly, the person behind the counter just looked at it and moved on. Now, I don't know about y'all, what your experience was. But it was not easy to buy alcohol when we were kids, in this, right? You had to be 21. And I just never ran into a situation where it was number one, we didn't try that often, right? You really didn't have to. There's other ways to obtain alcohol. But the times that we did try and get tricky like that, it wasn't going to go. Cigarettes were another story, okay? I smoked cigarettes when I was a teenager around that age. And you could easily buy cigarettes, right? Yeah, you would get ID'd some, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Okay, so that being said, it's a hard pill to swallow when you read stuff like this, and it's the legal aspect, because you have feelings versus facts versus legal stuff. Yes, should they have been getting on the boat and all that? No, right? We get that, right? It was a bad idea, right? Shouldn't have done this, should have gotten off, whatever. But then to turn around and basically blame her for what happened, I'm like, no, that's horrible, right? Like, I mean, they tried to do the right thing once they were in the situation. The other kids were trying to do the right thing. They were like, Paul, let us drive. And he wasn't going to do it. And he went manic, right? I mean, he did something. I don't know if he really went manic, but you know what I'm saying? He lost it. I mean, he was doing crazy stuff with this boat and was being a total you know what. And he wrecked the boat almost intentionally, as far as I'm concerned. Now, it wasn't intentional, but just with his actions and him being in like this blackout drunk state, right? And not letting anyone, you know, be able to take control of the boat. So again, I just feel bad for her family to have to read stuff like that and be like, oh, okay, so it's her fault. Okay, gotcha. And again, I think people should be held accountable for this kind of stuff. It's like, look, you know, if I found out that my kid died on a boat because so-and-so, and especially in this scenario of who it is and how much they get away with, because they went to this gas station and used somebody else's ID to buy alcohol, I'd be pissed, okay? I would 100% be like, you know what, I get it, my kid was not making the best decision, 100% own up to that, but guess what, nobody else in this situation was either. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just how I feel about it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I do not think that that will fly over too well, though, in the legal court. Now, again, if you follow me, you know, I ain't no lawyer, I ain't no doctor, I ain't none of that fancy stuff. I'm just a guy with a sofa and opinions on true crime. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe this could work in their favor, and I'll be like, look, you know what? Yeah, you're not going to get anything out of this convenience store, but, I mean, come on, right? Okay, now, let's go on to another case associated with this family. Let's talk about Stephen Smith for a minute. Let's very quickly talk about who Stephen Smith is. So Stephen Smith, his body was found in the middle of the Sandy Run Road. This is in rural Hampton County. This was on July 8th, 2015. Now, he had fatal blunt force trauma to the head. He had other secondary injuries. This was at first just very quickly written off as hit and run. But then when things were like looked at, and again, if you watch the documentary, you'll see where this is a whole big question mark of how did he really die, and basically fingers being pointed at the Murdaughs and Buster specifically having something to do with it, whether it was, you know, oh, Buster and some friends picked him up and then killed him and dumped him on the road and all this kind of stuff. Literally the 60-second version of it, in case, again, you haven't followed this case and you're like, who is Stephen Smith? So they went as far as to exhume his body several months ago or whatever, do a new autopsy, and open, like, they're continuing to investigate it. Now, what I want to do is talk about a couple of updates with that, because there's been some progress in that. And, you know, rightfully so. So if you ask me, I do not think that this was a hit and run. I believe the evidence of there's no signs of a hit and run. He still had his shoes on. There's no broken car parts. There's no this, there's no that. That being said, as I've said before, am I a cop? Am I an investigator? Have I been to hit and run scenes before? Absolutely not. So what do I know? Nothing, right? It's just my opinion. It's just my feelings. And as we know, feelings are not facts. So whatever the autopsy brings forth, with other people looking at it besides the people who did it first, because again, the Murdaughs have their hands in every little thing. And this was another one of the things where very quickly, you know, the brothers are swooping in. Oh, we'll represent you and we'll do this and we'll do that. And it doesn't sit right. And somebody else needs to look at it. So that being said, I'm going to put, again, some little screenshots up here, or you can read the article down below, or you can pause to read the whole thing, and we're going to talk about it. So as you'll see here, this is by Michael M. DeWitt Jr. of Greenville News, published June 12th, 2023. Stephen Smith family attorney, substantial progress in homicide investigation of slain teen. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. So the attorney Bland is saying that SLED, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, they took over the Smith's cold case. They started investigating, and they are saying that they are now making substantial progress. Going down to the bottom, according to Chief Keel, they, SLED, have some individuals in mind who have some knowledge and responsibility, and they are issuing subpoenas and warrants, Bland recently told the Hampton County Guardian. Let's move on to the next one. Bland has also seen evidence, although unconfirmed, that the South Carolina Attorney General's office has impaneled the South Carolina State Grand Jury. Only a court or grand jury can issue subpoenas, added Bland. I really do feel like by Labor Day we should see some sign of movement and know some things publicly. So this is another one where I'm just like, what do we got going here, right? And again, if the evidence points to somebody besides Buster and all them, great, so be it, right? My feeling is this: someone knows something of what happened to this poor kid, right? Whether it's they find out that they intentionally killed him or it was a hit and run, regardless, he was not meant to die that way. You know what I'm saying? So even if it's like, oh, nope, you know what, we caught him and we miraculously got space satellite cameras and it went down and yeah, it was a hit and run. Okay, well, somebody still needs to be brought to justice, right? That's still a horrible crime and a horrible way to die. Now, even worse, if we find out that this was some form of, like, say, a hate crime or somebody picked him up or, you know, whatever. I mean, there's tons of rumors out there. Now, Buster came out, and I'd done a video on this before, so we won't go into it now, saying, like, I vehemently deny, you know, anything to do with this and whatever, and, well, of course he's going to say that. Now, I'm not hung up on Buster had something to do with this 100%, right? At this point, I'm like, we don't know, you know. Yeah, all the rumor mill and all that type of stuff, it looks bad, but again, Buster, Paul, Alec, all that, you see, of course there's tons of rumors, because so much of the stuff that they did, I mean, is just grimy, right? So, if Buster really did do something with it, well, it wouldn't surprise us. But again, we need hard evidence. Now, there had been something that came out about some unrelated people completely to Buster and whatnot that maybe had something to do with this, and maybe that's what they're talking about, but we're gonna wait to see. But we're waiting with bated breath because, like I said, no matter how you cut the cake in this, bottom line is if it was nothing more than a hit and run, that's still terrible. Someone needs to be held accountable. His mother, his friends, his sister, they've all gone without Stephen in their life. And so I think it's an absolute tragedy, as well as I think it's a tragedy that Mallory lost her life, as well as I think it's a tragedy that Gloria lost her life. And then, you know, the Maggie, Paul, I mean, you name it. Look at all the deaths surrounding this family. It's absolutely insane. And then who knows for how many generations and years the corruption has gone on. And it's about time that this brought everything to a crashing end. So, that is it. If you are still watching, drop sofas over here, please, so Roscoe can sit on them and do his little thing. And let me know what you think down in the comment section. If you have anything to add to this, drop it down there. Again, remember, this is all just, you know, my opinion for entertainment. I urge you to do your own research, come to your own opinions, and talk about it down in the comment section. And in fact, once we meet down in the comment section, until then at least, I'll see you soon.